Cleaning Up is brought to you by the Liebreich Foundation and the Gilardini Foundation.
But you could do very radical things in a suit if you want to.
That 2019 will be the year of peak emission.
God bless the British civil servant, that's what I say.
It's the missing link to a livable climate.
So we're working really hard on green hydrogen.
Degrowth might be a viable political message in Europe.
Resilience is expensive in the short term, but cheap in the long term.
I almost thought, have I inspired Elon Musk?
Hello, my name is Michael Liebreich, and this is Cleaning Up. As we near the end of this strange and difficult year, so we also near the end of this first series of Cleaning Up. I'm delighted to welcome you to this, our festive season special. We've recorded 23 episodes of Cleaning Up, 23 extraordinary guests. We're going to take a little look back at some of the things that we've covered. We've had a lot of fun and covered a lot of ground. I started Cleaning Up during the depths of the first COVID-19 lockdown. It was a way of staying in touch with some friends and also sharing their wisdom with a wider audience. These are people who thought deeply about the world and about some of its challenges and problems.
There's a large part of the development industry which is about perpetuating the development industry.
The biggest problem in real estate is the misalignment of incentives.
Trade is really not working at the moment. We have not got a good reassurance that our trade policy, as far as we've got one, is being developed in thinking about how it's going to work for the transition. Not at all.
Despite 30 years of really successfully building public and political support for action on climate change, driving down costs of renewables, increasing rates of deployments of renewables, we have still continued to emit really unacceptable levels of carbon into the atmosphere today. And now we have another 30 years to turn the tanker.
We have a world now which is increasingly interconnected, where if you simply pull the plug on one system, everything cascades.
The subtitle of Cleaning Up is Leadership in an Age of Climate Change. Here we are near the end of 2020, and the leaders of over 70% of the global economy have committed their countries to a target of net zero sometime around the middle of the century. But it wasn't always thus. Just 5 years ago, no major leaders were talking about net zero mid-century. The guests on Cleaning Up are among those who have got us to where we are today. And when the going gets tough and we realize that those net zero pledges are going to be very difficult to achieve, it's these people who are going to help us to get there.
No, we didn't know that we could, but we knew that we had to. It's a difference there. We knew that we had to because we fully well understood that according to science, 2 degrees is abominably insufficient.
In one sense, the country that is not regulating the pollution associated with making the steel is effectively subsidizing the steel. And we, the rest of the world, are picking up the price for them not regulating the emissions because we have one atmosphere and we all experience the consequences of climate change wherever we are in the world.
When I talk to young people or people interested in changing their careers or anybody about climate change, sometimes people want to say, oh, but it doesn't, you could do that because it's transportation, but this isn't something that's relevant to me. And I say, no, our entire economy is steeped in fossil fuel, and every single aspect of that, whether you're a physician or an artist or whatever it is, we have to get fossil fuels out of that.
Trade is not enormously well set up for this, and another set of our values now are environment. And the trade system is quite a long way behind on this. They are ready to catch up, but they're going to need some countries to do some innovative things. And I think the UK is actually one of the countries that could do some innovative things because we have the Climate Change Act, because we've got commitments on renewables.
Many of my guests on Cleaning Up have played incredibly important roles in the transition towards a low carbon economy to date. And it's been great fun getting them to talk about some of those behind the scenes moments that they've experienced along the way. Let's have a listen.
There were many negotiators who said, oh, no big deal. There's not that much of a difference between 2 degrees and 1.5. And the Iranians knew there is a huge difference, like survival. So but they can't just stand up and say that. The entire UNFCCC is science-based, science-driven, science-responsive. And so there had to be a scientific study that would examine the difference between those two temperatures.
I know all these rock bands. I know Floyd, I know Zeppelin, I know Queen, I know Yes, I know Black Sabbath, I know Deep Purple. No one's ever got those guys together. So I called up David Gilmour, explained the idea. Turns out he had an Armenian friend. And he said yes. And he said, what song are you looking at doing? And I said, well, Smoke on the Water.
The British Lib Dems were basically my best ally, and almost all EU legislation on efficiency, on renewables, getting the market right.
And I remember sitting with the Minister of Energy in DC in a very posh hotel, and he had a beautiful suit on, very well put out, probably educated at Oxford or Cambridge. And he said to me, look, Morgan, you seem pretty reasonable and not and kind of new at this World Bank stuff. So I'm going to tell you what needs to happen because your colleagues won't listen to me.
Globally, it's between 13 to 14%, maybe 15. If you say double the share, there are no numbers. We can sell that in the States. Take your energy efficiency. You want 40%? If you push for 1.5% or 2% per year, you get your 40%. And this was around 2010.
Yeah.
They say you get it. They say, so leave the numbers, use words.
Becoming a kind of co-negotiator in the Iran situation was also quite a ride, also in 2015 and 2016. So again, when the president is really engaged in those issues and you have a chance to advance it, it's a very, very exciting place to be, and it was really a great opportunity, in my view, to help move the ball forward in both cases.
You were reminiscing about the meeting in Mexico with Carlos Slim, and I remember that very well as well. Not so much for the artwork that you had mentioned, but more when I arrived in my hotel room, there was a very nice package, a welcome package on my bed, welcoming me with two rather nice male silk ties. So I have to say my husband was very appreciative of those.
One of the recurring themes on cleaning up so far has been innovation. If the global economy is going to address the challenges facing it, if we're going to stay away from those planetary boundaries, we're going to need what I call massively distributed innovation, innovation that changes every single sphere of human activity. The guests on Cleaning Up are innovators. They've been working on some really cool stuff. They've not just been talking about innovation, they've been delivering it.
You mentioned electric cars. Let's look at Norway. Last month, 2/3 of new cars sold in Norway were electric cars because they've gone and put in place the recharging infrastructure. They've made it easier for people to make that transition. And so I think for every problem we have in every economy of the world, somewhere, some government or some business has come up with a solution.
Data centers need a performance standard which is below 1 and not above 1. So because we have immersion cooling, so we can now have data centers in the city centers and takes the heat which you need anyway, because which we'll have anyway because you have electricity driving the servers, and this heat is like having geothermal in the middle of a city. So these IT servers, data centers, that's a global industry, so we need global standards.
I was certain that aviation would become electric, but it was not the time where I would have been taken seriously if I was saying it. First, I had to fly around the world. And when I flew around the world, then I had the credibility to say that aviation would become electric in 10 years for 50-seaters, up to 50-seaters.
The idea is to create a 10 gigawatt solar farm then basically pipe that energy to a huge battery that's far bigger than anything that's been done to date in Darwin at the top of Australia. And then, with a high voltage direct current cable, 4,500 kilometers of that all the way to Singapore.
Being climate oriented, we were like, whoa, we electric cars are something that we should have in the society. There had been the decade earlier, the GM disaster with electric vehicles and who killed the electric car and all of that. But we said, you know what, we think it actually might work this time because people are more oriented towards the climate implications. And plus, this is going to be a really fast, great car that people, there won't be any sacrifice in driving this thing.
5 years or so, I've been looking for the reason that electric vehicles, electric cars, yeah, that will work. But electric trucks, that's something different.
Another common theme has been energy and the role that energy access plays in development. Let's not forget that even today, around 800 million people have no access whatsoever to electricity, and 2.5 billion people are still cooking with wood, with charcoal, and with animal dung, with horrible effects on their health. These are issues I've tried to work on over more than a decade, but some of our guests have been playing extraordinary leadership roles.
Interestingly, both Ban Ki-moon in post-war Korea and Kandeh in Sierra Leone growing up had visceral and empirical understanding of what it was like to live with energy poverty.
We then need to ensure that everybody has access to energy and it's affordable and reliable.
Given so much of what we deliver in terms of modern healthcare is electricity dependent, how on earth do you expect, with the best doctors and nurses in the world, them to be able to deliver healthcare without having electricity? I mean, it's just, it's so basic. It's almost like a human right now, I would say.
In the first narrative, we said energy for all, meaning access for all. So some people very cleverly, diplomats and all, say, well, why don't you add sustainable energy for all? That was appealing to the climate change people because it was about renewables and energy efficiency.
This has been a game-changing year in terms of the discussion about diversity and inclusion. I've written before about how we're not going to be able to address climate change. We're not going to be able to transform our energy system, our transportation system, other aspects of our economy technologically, unless we also transform them socially. Not surprisingly, many of the guests on Cleaning Up have been thinking deeply about these issues. Let's hear what they have to say.
I don't think we are making progress fast enough. I don't think that there is still a full understanding that that gender really matters when it comes to addressing climate change, and I think it's still kind of also not fully understood that women are also more vulnerable to climate change. And
why do we name the women, right? Because it happens to be unusual that there are women in any space at any, let's say, influential level. That should not be the case. We should have 50% women, 50% men, making it completely impossible or at least unnecessary to put names on a list. The fact that we can put names on a list and the list is incomplete means that we don't have 50 and 50 yet.
I've got to make it a place where you want to come, which means that we do have to have more diverse faculty. We do need to be having different perspectives in the syllabi and in the curriculum. We do have to understand the origins of the theories of international relations. We do have to be able to critique them. And so we have to do all of that.
While there are obstacles in your path, as long as, I was lucky in that when I went off on my own, I had worked for a long time. And so I had a network, I had very supportive bosses, most of them male. And so it's not just the soil that you speak of, it's your network, your peeps, and the credibility that you can establish.
One of the things that struck me about the guests so far on Cleaning Up is that these people who've played leading roles in the transformation to clean energy or transportation, in climate action, in sustainability, high political office, they have a very strong integrated worldview, strong moral compasses. And some of that they shared with me.
What I did a couple of times now, and I think it's one of my most valuable contributions, even though it's intellectually boring by now, is basically every time someone comes out with a study saying, yes, but electric vehicles, when you look at everything, they actually emit more CO2, to basically squash that, to basically swat that every single time. Very, very, very boring.
To me, the most vital thing to do to decarbonize is make clean technologies obviously cheaper than dirty technologies. And then everyone around the world, not just in your country, just out of self-interest, whether they care about climate or not, picks the clean stuff because it makes more sense.
Nicely described this concept of resilience, where you don't put all your eggs in one basket, where you think about difficult situations. You have a number of different strategies up your sleeve so you can respond when one of those outcomes becomes clearer than the others.
If we start making solar panels using solar panels and windmills using windmills, and we use those for the mines and for the factories, our emissions can basically go to zero. So that's a very important sort of mental model, that CO2 emissions, if you use renewable technology to produce renewable technology, you can get extremely close to zero.
The question of, well, in that case, why have we got an office? And there are very good reasons to have an office, but they are around essentially doing what you cannot do elsewhere.
If there's a President Biden and a Republican Senate, Democratic House, presumably, all that means is you better start working on those coalitions. That's hard work. But I would say, on a positive vein, I think that has been a characteristic of Biden's career. That's what he's always done.
What do you say to a Mr. Rechsteiner who's propagating a figure of 1 million dead from Chernobyl?
I mean, it honestly really upsets me, this kind of fear-mongering, because it causes enormous distress and actually contributes towards the mental health and, you know, real public health impacts that we've seen and we continue to see to this day in affected regions, where people are so afraid that their lives are often destroyed as a result of the fear and for what? For ideological point scoring.
Really what I always tried to do in my life, I wanted an exciting and useful life. Because if it's only exciting, it's selfish. And if it's only useful, it's boring.
Well, that's the whole thesis that I bring to the table, and I think you bring as well, right? Is that this has got to be structural. The notion that individuals are going to make individual choices that allow them to, to reduce carbon emissions is fanciful.
But I choose to focus on the other data points. I choose to focus on the data points and the references of the evidence that we're actually moving forward. And it is a choice, Michael, okay? It is a choice.
We need to say this is the largest wealth creation opportunity of our lifetime. And I even coined a phrase, creating climate wealth. And I remember I got tons of blowback because all the philanthropists said, we hate the word wealth. We want to use the word prosperity. Yeah. And I was like, that's ridiculous. Could you imagine saying creating climate prosperity? No.
I found a bunch of books basically saying there is no problem, it's all a hoax, or the problem will solve itself automatically, don't worry. And then I found a bunch of books saying either we're doomed, there's nothing we can do, or degrowth is the only answer. And that didn't seem very satisfactory when we still have billions of people in poverty. And so I said, well, okay, I want to write my own book that says, obviously there's a real problem, and our ability to innovate, if we focus on it, is great.
One of the fun things about the longer form conversations that we have on cleaning up is that it gives us enough time to delve into the backgrounds of the guests, to find out what made them the people and the leaders that they are.
There are lots of reasons, but one of the reasons back then in 2006 was deforestation. And deforestation outside of Beijing had created sandstorms, or effectively dust, that would just come straight into the center of Beijing. And so it started opening my eyes as to what environmental degradation can do.
But the solar piece, takes me back to a 10-year-old child who saw solar for the first time in Wales on a very rainy day, and thought at that time at the Centre for Alternative Technology, when they'd only just opened their visitor centre, this is really cool, this is really interesting.
It really happened because I've always had an interest in two things: entrepreneurship and innovation. And part of that is my father was an engineer, he was an inventor, sort of grew up with all of these gizmos around the house. So just a soft spot in my heart for entrepreneurs and inventors. At the same time, I've always been interested in the interface between science and society and social issues.
And Zipcar was the first, I'd say, platform, a really strong platform company, and first part of the sharing economy. Our application of wireless that you could make and the internet was really, really novel when we first started.
So there you have it. 23 fascinating conversations with 23 fascinating people. And because many of them were old friends of mine, of course, we had time for a bit of bants as well. It's not going to be a role in a potential Biden administration.
I did see the rumor that I was being positioned for energy secretary, but with all the stuff I've said on your stage, I'm not sure that I can get through a confirmation hearing.
I promised that I'd get a beer. As you can see, I've got myself a Foster's.
Mate, that's very sad to see. The only people who drink Foster's are the English. No one actually drinks it in Australia.
You and I have had our moments of disagreement on where we're...
Well, yeah, we don't need to go there. No, but I mean, I
think the audience would rather enjoy relitigating Brexit.
If you're listening on podcast, that visual effect's going to have no impact at all. Just want to clarify that. But
you wouldn't believe what Roger's just done. If you're watching, if you're listening to this on the podcast, you've got to subscribe to the YouTube channel.
Yes, you see more clever visual tools employed all the time.
Way, he just pointed at the wall. Okay, I'll admit. You realize there is an alternative universe, a parallel universe, where during that period you discovered freestyle skiing. And became a superb freestyle skier, and maybe went to the Olympics in 1992 in Albertville, and we would have met there instead of on the talking circuit talking about clean energy.
It could have been, and basically it should have been, because we ski in the same place in Les Diablerets, the same mountain village in Switzerland, you and me.
Exactly, we could have met there, and who knows, maybe I would have become a balloonist.
Yes.
It's fabulous to see you in person, because on Twitter and when we talk on the telephone, I forget that you really look like an energy guru should look like. I have this little rubbishy beard, but you really look the part.
Thank you.
And I forgot, I've lost track. Now you have what, 7 children?
Yeah, just the 3, but also you're approximately right, because we do also have 2 cats, 1 new boxer dog, and a blue goldfish. If you can explain that one.
Well, there you go, 7. Okay, that's
so
perfect.
That comes to 7, and I'm going to lead you up and down those passes next time.
Of course, the risk in buying a new bike is that the excuse that it's the bike goes out the window. So you've got to actually do some training then.
You haven't seen the bike I've got my eyes on.
All right.
It may have a small motor.
Ah.
Right. And that's a real thing that you're doing with olives.
That's a real thing we're doing with olives.
2020 was a very difficult year, but let's not forget that it also contained much that was positive. As we reach the end of the year, we've got more than one successful COVID-19 vaccine, an absolute triumph for science. We've seen clean energy and clean transportation ride through the economic dislocation of the pandemic with extraordinary resilience. And we've seen how society is demanding that sustainability is put at the heart of any recovery program. And we've seen those extraordinary pledges for net zero by the middle of the century from country after country. 2021 is going to be a very different year to 2020. First of all, hopefully, we'll see a successful global rollout of the COVID-19 vaccines, not just in the wealthy countries, but also across the global south. Secondly, we'll be seeing President Biden take the helm of a new US administration, and the US resuming its normal role of global leadership, not just in matters of climate, but also matters of health, the economy, and other aspects that touch all of our lives. And we'll see a steady build-up to COP26. So let me wish you all the best for this festive season. Celebrate it, take some time off with your family, stay safe, stay socially distanced though. We'll be kicking off the second series of Cleaning Up on January the 6th next year with a leading light of the UK climate change movement. Baroness Bryony Worthington was lead author in the UK's historic 2008 Climate Change Act, and she now sits as a crossbench peer in the House of Lords. She's founded a number of climate-related charities, and she's now an advisor to the Quadrature Climate Foundation as they set up a major grant-giving program. So with that, it only remains for me to wish you a happy new year and hope to see you early in 2021. I'm going to have a few takes of this. We'll get it in the end. My guest next week on Cleaning Up is a manifest. Right, I haven't got any beer left. Manifestate. Right, okay, let me try this.
You want to get another beer?
No, that's the last thing I need. That they're determined is the answer to everybody's problems. Yes!
I don't think we were recording actually. No, I was joking.
That's a real tongue twister, that one. My goodness.
Exactly the karma he needed to show this evening.
My guest this week is James Cameron. He's a barrister. He's a barrister. If I was to invite you back to a future episode of Cleaning Up, what would you say?
Hasta la vista, baby. I'll be back.
At this point, I'd like to thank our viewers and listeners. If you've been enjoying Cleaning Up, please help us to get the word out. And make sure you never miss a future episode, either by subscribing on YouTube or subscribe via your favorite podcast channel. And don't forget, the best thing of all, just tell your friends.